Can you just give me a second? Sorry.
Yeah, I can. Oh, anyway, welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And Laura, can you read the webcasting introduction, please? Thank you.
When I get it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. I would like to remind everyone that this meeting will be filmed live or recorded and uploaded to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings. If any public speakers on MS Teams do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Members and public speakers are reminded to turn on their microphones before speaking and to turn them off when they're finished.
Thank you. So, again, welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Baldwin, Chairman of the Committee. Tonight, Jen Gord, Chief Operating Officer, and Andrew Small, Executive Director, and Section 151 Officer are sitting on my left. And to my right is Laura Kerman from Democratic Services, and Lou Baker is the webcaster. As members will be aware, the budget for 2025-2026 will be considered as item 11 of the agenda, and members should note that two appendices of this report are restricted and shown in item 15 of the agenda. We've decided to change the running order this evening because we're going to have item 11 after item 13, which means that after that we can go into private session to discuss the rest of the budget. So I hope that's okay with everyone. I'd also like to welcome Citizens Advice Epping Forest, as we have a speaker this evening for item 7. Thank you. Are there any apologies and substitutions this evening?
Yeah, we have two apologies. Councillor Lucas and Councillor Wiskin have apologised, and the substitutes are Councillor Church and Councillor Nwiki, respectively.
Thank you. Right, so we've done substitute members. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members of the committee? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bassett.
Thank you, Chairman. I should declare I am Chairman of the Qualis Board, and consequently at various times it does mention them, and I'm here to answer any questions if any come up. It's not a pecuniary interest, so...
No. Thank you for that. Right, can members confirm the minutes, pages 5 to 6, the minutes of the last meeting? Okay, thank you for that. And matters arising and outstanding actions. Are there any matters arising and or outstanding actions? Yeah, Councillor Lyon.
Yeah, I mean, we had a presentation from TfL a few months ago that was minuted, and one of the things that I would like to have recorded is a request for an update to their public announcements on the programme. Things have improved, but it will be very useful to get a public update on their programme.
Thank you. Okay, that's noted. Thank you for that. Right, let's go on to public questions and requests to address the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So this will be to the Citizens Advice Epping Forest. Do we have 3 minutes for this, or is it 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Yeah, so if you can speak for 3 minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I am Victoria Manning-Munro. I'm a trustee and treasurer at Citizens Advice Epping Forest. Thank you for your time today. We were due to have our board meeting this evening. We've cancelled it so that we can be here to address you. Between April and December last year, 2,175 clients came through the doors to our service. In practice, some called, some emailed, and some came to our dedicated hubs in Waltham Abbey, Epping, and in Limes Farm. Let me reiterate, that's 2,175 clients in just 9 months. We forecast we're going to see 2,900 clients this financial year. That is a 17% increase on the last financial year. In turn, that will be a 13% increase on the financial year before that. As ward councillors, you know very well that these days we are helping to advise working people to avoid homelessness and deal with problems of debt. Dealing with those problems means keeping families together, helping keep people in work, and so helping to contain the soaring costs of emergency housing. To do so, we provide professional advice. Our advisors go through 3 months of rigorous training in order to be able to provide it, and we ourselves as a charity are regulated by 3 different organisations to make sure we keep up to the high standards that are expected of us. The truth is, we are really struggling to meet this soaring demand for services from us. Every year, we spend so much more delivering advice to our clients than we receive in grants. And at the end of this financial year, we will have been running a budget deficit for 3 consecutive years. The deficit is getting worse because our grant income is staying flat and our expenditure is increasing. And against this backdrop, we have made huge changes. We have cut all of our regional offices and concentrated our presence in this very building. We have focused on giving more remote advice, for example, through emails and calls and through our hubs. And today, the board was expected to pass a motion to cancel the lease on our offices in this building as well later this year. All of this is to drive as much of our money through our advice service as is feasibly possible. And now we're at the stage where there really is nothing left to trim except for essential services. Even if you honour another year at our full budget, we're going to have to make difficult financial decisions in the year that follows. And I know that we are facing really similar issues to the ones that are focal points for you. The hope for you is that perhaps by merging with other councils, you might generate efficiencies that are more than you can access as a single district operating alone. And that's a clue to the future for us too. We're waiting for clarity on what you decide to do to work out who we need to be talking to in other citizens' advice hubs about mergers of our own. But in the meantime, and considering this period of heightened uncertainty as you consider structural change, you and your constituents really need a fully functional, full capacity citizens' advice to be your backstop. And if we have to deal with anything more than a real terms cut, I'm sorry to report that that may not be possible. We ask, given all the incredible work that our advisors do for you, that you do your utmost to protect our budget so that we have valuable time to make difficult decisions of our own. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you for that, and thank you for attending and for your comments. I'll just go over to members now. Do members have any questions in relation to that contribution? Yeah, please, Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one question. You talked about the number of people coming through your doors. Do you actually measure the outcomes, the successful outcomes, and what you've actually achieved in terms of the rate of people coming through and the rate of satisfied customers leaving?
We do. We measure these things in different ways. So we measure it in terms of the number of clients we see and are able to respond to. We also provide detailed reporting back to National Citizens Advice, and they model the impact on fiscal impact as well as kind of public value impact. Just to give you an illustration of that, one of the impacts that I saw in our recent modelling was £5 million in public value, comprising fiscal value as well as well-being and mental health value that we provide to the local community and the clients that we serve.
Thank you. Can I go over to Councillor Holly Whitbread, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and I just want to say thank you very much for that report. Obviously, we can't give the specifics of saving proposals this evening, but the Scrutiny Committee will be discussing my report and some of the private reports at this stage later on in the meeting. But let me assure you that we've listened to what you're saying. We absolutely understand the value of citizens' advice. I was housing and community portfolio holder for a number of years, and actually, in many ways, people using your services prevents them coming through our doors.
Absolutely.
So that's something I'm very conscious of and very aware of. It's also really welcome to hear the way you've changed your organisation. I remember having conversations during COVID and pre-COVID about ways that the organisation could shape and modernise, and it sounds like you've made many steps in the right direction there as well. I will say, as you also identified, we're facing very significant challenges and we're having to make a series of very difficult decisions as part of this budget process. But please be assured we've listened to the representations from yourself, from your colleagues, and also from the expressions of councillors who also appreciate your services on the ground in their wards. So it was more of a thank you, and to say that we've noticed what you said and we are listening. We can't make any public guarantees this evening because it's part of the private report, but we will be in touch in due course when we finalise the budget.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And can I go over to Councillor John Whitehouse, please?
Yes, thanks for the presentation. You've packed a lot into a short time. I just wondered if you could say a bit more. I mean, you mentioned housing as an important bit of the caseload. I just wondered if you could give us a sense of, you know, how the caseload breaks down. You know, is it mainly housing? Is it mainly benefits? Is it mainly consumer? And, you know, where are there sort of particular changes that are happening over time?
So I'd be really happy to provide you with a granular breakdown. If you don't mind, I'll take that offline and respond to you with some hard data, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you too. And can I go to Councillor Janet Whitehouse, please?
Thank you. Yes, I want to thank Victoria for coming to talk to us this evening. I mean, I'm aware of the good work they do, and I've referred people to Citizens Advice for their expert advice. I'm sure many other councillors have as well. But I wasn't aware of the difficulties they're facing at the moment. I wasn't aware of how they had to shrink their services, and I think that is very, very disturbing. As the Cabinet member said, you know, promises can't be made now, but I think that has helped to inform discussions. So thank you.
Thank you again. So I think that brings to an end the that. And so you are most welcome to stay, should you wish to the rest of the meeting. Thank you very much for coming here today. That's really, yeah. Okay, so let's go on then to item 8, which is executive decisions calling. Are any matters? I'll go to are any matters referred to the committee?
There are no matters referred to this committee at this time, however.
Sorry. Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's fair to let members know that 5 councillors have called in the decision to acquire the Cottage Lane car park from Qualis. I think ideally we'd have done that after this meeting, because obviously that may be one of the issues discussed tonight, but the deadline was yesterday, and then obviously after tonight's meeting we can decide whether we want to take that forward or not, but I thought members ought to be aware.
Thank you for that. I was indeed aware of that potential call-in, and I know that after this evening's meeting you'll make a final decision about that, so thank you. Okay, so now can we go on to the Q3 budget monitoring report, which is item 9, and that's on the separate supplementary sheet. So we could go over to that item, and I think this item will be introduced by Andrew Small. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I do realise there's quite a lot of financial papers on the agenda tonight, and probably the most important of those is the budget paper. So I hadn't intended to dwell on this Q3 budget monitoring report overly, really. I'm saving the debate for perhaps later on. But it is important that Scrutiny has sight of this position ahead of the budget debate overall, because it sets out the current in-year performance, which will obviously have a bearing upon how the Council's able to deliver its budget for next year. And I suppose the report does identify there's some good news, really, largely in as much as that the Council is forecasting to underspend by just over £500,000 in the current financial year. This is at December, so 3/4 of the way through the year. We believe we're going to underspend on the general fund by about £543,000. As always, that's a combination of some spending pressures, which are making life more difficult, particularly in the area of planning. But these are being offset by some underspends, largely to do with delayed delivery of ICT transformation programmes, £630,000, and some lower financing costs as well, £338,000. So overall, leading to a kind of quite a respectable position, I guess, really, in terms of £543,000 improvement on the forecast that improvement on the budget that we set back in February. The position for the housing revenue account is slightly lower, but also showing a projected underspend of £118,000. And again, that's a combination of some over and underspends that are drawn out within the report. Capital programme, both general fund and housing revenue account underspending, largely to do with schemes being delivered slightly later than I suppose we anticipated that we would do when we set the budget. That includes the operational hub and Qualis drawdown of some of the loans that the council have approved for delivery and completion of some of their schemes. The housing revenue account largely associated with the delayed delivery of housing investment schemes, but recognising there is some pressure on some of the operational costs around repair work. There's an extensive section about performance indicators at the back of the report, as there always is. And again, I think this is showing generally an improved position, but I don't intend to go into those in any great detail. As I say, I think that overall the report provides important context in terms of consideration of the Council's overall current financial health, which is an indication of moving into next year and the budget consideration later on the agenda. That's probably all I wanted to say. Thanks, Chair. Happy to take any questions via yourself.
Thank you very much for that. So I'll open things up to the committee if they have any questions or comments. Councillor Bassett, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of things. On page 4, under net expenditure, the Chief Executive, which is not just the Chief Executive's pay, I know, has jumped dramatically by 90,000. Do we know why this was? I know other areas all come into that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, can you go, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's partly to do with the absence of the Chief Executive at the moment and the need to kind of backfill in certain and provide additional capacity to enable Jennifer Gould and myself to act into some of that, to fill Georgina's shoes, and the need to backfill some of our roles to provide, as I say, capacity.
Thank you for that. Another one is more a comment on page 5, 2.2, planning development overspend. In my other role, I have seen so many developers now are mothballing sites rather than putting in planning applications, because they said the economic situation is not right. They are saying the cost of materials has gone through the roof, and even when they build them, they're having trouble selling them. So I can't see that altering at the moment because people are under a lot of financial pressure and, shall we say, not looking to buy houses, but most probably looking to rent them. So there are lots of things in the market that are causing problems at the moment, and I know Andrew has.
Only to agree. I think we've all witnessed the repercussions of wider global events, I think, as much as anything else, really, in terms of the housing market. I was just going to counterpoint, some of the government's aspirations around increasing housing delivery in this framework is quite challenging, isn't it? I would say, really. So interesting to see how that materialises.
Thank you very much. And do we have any other questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Lyon.
Just a point on the strategic projects. Could you say any more about that and where our forecast is actually going on that one?
Andrew, please. Thank you.
I think it's an interesting area, and it would have been a bit more straightforward, I think, had we not overlaid the future in LGR, I think, in terms of what that means for our delivery of strategic projects as an organisation, really, and on which projects we'll want to continue to focus on and which ones we won't. I would anticipate, that we'll have to look quite closely at each of those projects to work out which ones would add value in a realistic time frame, and which ones, are more aspirational. Longer time frame for delivery, and we'll need to review which projects we progress, and that will have probably demand less resource, I should think, for the delivery of those projects, but I don't think we can underestimate the time and capacity required to help deliver local government reform, if that is indeed a thing for the forthcoming year.
Yeah, Councillor, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just to say, yeah, that I'm reserving the rest of the questions for the budget discussion, but in relating to local government reorganisation and devolution is something we need to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, yeah. Councillor Bassett.
Chairman, I just found another question. It's a question, just an explanation, really. On page 9, under the Movement in General Fund, can you explain exactly what comes under the word Garden Town? Is this the Gilston project? It is.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. It's the Harlan Gilston Garden Town project.
I don't know, something else that we weren't aware of.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions from the committee or comments? If there aren't, I can open it up to other members present in the chamber. Yeah, okay, yeah. Councillor, what's that? What's it? Morris. Councillor Morris, sorry, apologies.
Hi, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I noticed there's a, I suppose, sort of, is it good news or is it bad news? That there's a continuing underspend in ICT and transformation. I mean, these are pretty critical projects. So we're heading into we're already there, in a place where ICT is going to underpin everything we do, and digital communications and systems are going to be really important. And I just question, I mean, I've noticed this over the past few reports. There's always seems to be an underspend in ICT. And I wonder if this isn't building up issues for the future, this level of underinvestment in information technology systems.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, can I go over to you, Andrew? Thank you.
I think, like so much of tonight's and future conversations, is another LGR question, I think, really, in terms of, I think there have been delays in implementing some of the projects that were built into the budget. One of those is around cloud-based technology, for example, and whilst it's taken longer to get off the ground, I think now we will need to pause and do consider whether that is the right technology footprint or platform for a new organisation for which we are not necessarily, don't have a single voice in. Sorry, we don't have the majority voice in, as well, I was going to say. So I think we do need to look at these projects again more carefully to work out if we invest in it now, only to find that in a couple of years' time it's not the standard technology platform for a new authority, for example, then anything we invest now would be wasted. So I think we just need to look at that quite closely and quite carefully to make sure that what we do spend now is sensible and adds value to the organisation in the short term.
Thank you, yeah. Councillor Bassett.
I knew I had something else. Page 14, 6.3, it refers to capital works being delayed because of a fire risk assessment and compartmentalisation survey currently taking place. And a lot of the work there is all hanging back for that to work out exactly what is needed and what we can do. Do we have a date when that will actually be, and who then assesses it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, there's a survey going on at the moment, so by the end of this financial year we should know, be in a better position to know what we're doing and be able to programme that work in. So the delays have happened because of that survey, but it is drawing to a conclusion now and certainly should be finished by the end of the financial year.
Thank you very much, yeah. Are there any other questions on this subject? I mean, I'll have a question myself if the members do not. Can I just ask on page 13, 5.3, where it goes down to contracts, partnership and procurement. Now, I noticed there's it says that there is a rephasing of cash flow payments for the new Epping Leisure Centre. I just wondered, is it possible, obviously when we get overspends and underspends, that even after we've kind of set the budget, can we compensate between overspends and underspends? Can we, this phrase here, rephase funds if we've got significant, underfunding to overfunding. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the important thing is that we stay within, as much as we can, the overall funding envelope or the budget envelope for the scheme. That's probably the most important thing. Delivery is always a bit more subjective in terms of, because there are always other conditions and factors which influence upon the developer that may impact upon the timetable for completion of the scheme. So we have to be alive to the fact that sometimes things speed up, less often I fear, and sometimes they slow down. And as we become aware of that, then what we all need to do is factor the demands for cash and cash going out of the organisation, take into account our best forecast, and this is this is what we do as part of overall, one, of budget monitoring, but two, in terms of budget setting as well, trying to reprofile our expected use of cash to deliver those schemes so we can work out what our borrowing costs will be those individual years. But it's, as I say, it's part of an ongoing process to try and refine our assumptions based upon the information that we have available to us on delivery.
Okay, yep, thank you for that. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, can the committee approve the recommendation, the decision, which is on page 2, and it's 1 to 5? So can we approve those recommendations? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Councillor Murray, to the meeting. Could I just ask if you have any declarations of interest?
No, I don't think so, Chairman, and apologies for lateness. I think I did explain. We've just set the council tax in Loughton.
Okay, that's fine, yeah, thank you. 20 Dwarfs Road. Also, Councillor Brooks, I'll just ask you the same question. Do you have any declarations of interest? No. Yep, okay. Yep, thank you very much. So,
sorry, Chairman, I should perhaps clarify. I haven't changed my declaration of interests, and on my declaration of interests that's on the public website, it does say that I'm a trustee of the CAB. Yeah. That's no longer the case. Yeah,
yeah. Thank you for that very much. Thank you very much. Right. So now, can we go on to item 10, which is pages 7 to 26, and that is to consider the review of council tax, empty and second homes premiums. Okay. Okay, imagine it, right. I think this will be... Pete Freeman, he's online. Yes, thank you. This is, will be answered by Peter Freeman, Services Manager, will present the report. So, Peter, if I can go over to you if possible. Yeah.
Yes, good evening. So, basically, the council has introduced premium charges back in 2019, having had the ability to do so from 2013 onwards, but having resisted for a number of years, we introduced premium charges on empty homes in the district. Now, an empty home is defined as a home which is substantially unfurnished and nobody's sole or main residence. And as a result of the last government's Regeneration Act, so it's Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023, we had the ability as a local authority to reduce the period in which the premium charge kicked in, which currently we have and previously had a period of 2 years. So once the property was deemed empty for a period of 2 years, we could charge the premium charge of an additional 100% council tax. In essence, that meant that anyone with a property that was empty and unfurnished for a period of 2 years, we could charge 200% of the council tax on that property. And that's all around trying to reintroduce properties into the market, reduce the strain on local housing and obviously homelessness, etc., particularly around private sector renting, etc. And as I say, as part of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, the last government decided that councils could opt to bring that forward to a period of just 12 months. So once a property was empty for a period of 12 months, you could charge the premium charge. Again, last year, because of still, people struggling coming out of COVID and the effects on the economy in general, the council decided not to introduce that. Across Essex, we were one of only 4 that didn't introduce it last year. And from the 1st of April 2025, every local authority across Essex will have introduced the change in their local policy and introduce the premium charge after a period of 12 months that the property has remained unfurnished and no one's sole or main residence. So particularly around the local government devolution, we would kind of stick out like a sore thumb if we didn't come in line with all the other Essex authorities, because we would literally be the only Essex authority that didn't introduce the change from the 1st of April. It goes on then to look at second homes, but we have to give a period of 12 months notice on second homes, so second homes would not be affected until the 1st of April 2026. So, in essence, what I'm asking for is any comment on the report before it goes to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much for your report. And, so I will open things up to the committee. Yeah, Councillor Rackham, please. Councillor Rackham, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much for the report. I've just got a few questions, please. Firstly, how do you identify the properties you believe are unoccupied? And how do you know who to charge? What happens if it's challenged, for example? Let's just say that the owner is working abroad on a contract, doesn't know when they're coming home, and also doesn't want to rent out the house because of that reason. And what does substantially unfurnished mean, and how do you confirm it? And my last question is, how much money was actually raised from this last year? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Can I go over to you, Peter, to answer that?
Yeah, so lots of questions there. Firstly, in terms of what is deemed substantially unfurnished, well, a property would be substantially unfurnished if there were not what you would require in order to reside in the property, i.e. you would expect some form of white goods, particularly a fridge or a freezer in this day and age. You would expect tables, chairs, settees, beds, etc., etc. How do we prove a property is substantially unfurnished? Well, first of all, the onus is on the owner to tell us, but also we have an inspector. So we employ an inspector, and part of their duties is to go round and visit and make arrangements with people, and we do it very regularly. We actually make arrangements with people to either visit the property when the owner is back from abroad, because yes, you're right, we do have lots of situations where owners do work abroad. As far as how do we know who owns the property, again, there is a requirement on every individual that either owns or resides in the property to inform the local authority within a period of 21 days. Of course, people don't always tell you, and so we have to rely on things like, sending out communications, even requesting details from the previous owner if the property's been sold, or the solicitors that dealt with the sale, dealing with agents, estate agents, letting agents, etc. How does someone challenge it? Well, quite simply, the Valuation Office Agency people, and they are part of the HMRC, and people can challenge the authority's decision through the Valuation Office Agency and the Tribunal Service. So that would be how we deal with that. As far as how much was raised last year, it isn't, we aren't talking vast numbers. So we are talking probably around about, and I don't have the figures off the top of my head, I would say we're looking at about £150,000. So, and you've got to bear in mind that properties change all the time. One of the reasons why the government, the previous government, looked at bringing the period down from 2 years to 1 year is that it was very obvious that a lot of people were, as soon as the premium charge kicked in, they would try to get around that by furnishing the property and making it appear as though it was being lived in, and so, you know, I'm not really sure quite what's behind the thinking of, you know, that just because you bring it forward by 12 months, they're going to stop trying to circumvent the circumstances, but because that, quite simply, people will always try and circumvent circumstances. However, that's the position. It really is about regeneration of properties. It really is about trying to tackle the housing problem within each local authority's area, and in particular around the cost of private rented. If there were more properties available, maybe in the private rented market, it may well reduce the price of the private rented accommodation. But also, you know, it is to take the burden off local authorities around homelessness. And so it's kind of trying to encourage people that if they do have an empty property, that property should really come back into circulation, if at all possible, and be used either, I mean, you know, there are even options around leasing the property to the local authority themselves. But that would have to be a long-term situation dealt with by housing. So, but it really is around bringing properties back into the market, and that if you're not willing to do that, then you're kind of almost going to have to pay the price. That's what's behind it, I guess.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Lyon, please?
Thanks, Chairman. Interesting report. Thank you. And I think what you just said before about bringing empty houses back into use is the most important thing. And just looking at the number of properties that have been outstanding and where we're charging 100%, 200% and 300% sort of shows that. But I know in Chigwell, where I am, we've got a number of properties that have been left empty for a considerable time, and in fact are falling down. There's one particularly semi-detached house that is falling down, and a large development that's been caretakers have been living in for some time, just to, I presume, to keep the council tax down. I don't know if there's anything that your officers can do to encourage those sorts of long-term uses back into reasonable form.
Yeah, you know, it is a very difficult area, and yes, I share your concern. You know, you don't have to drive very far around the district to find properties that have clearly been bought by developers and have then, you know, almost left to rack and ruin for whatever reason, you know, whether that be that they're just waiting for the market to be that more buoyant, whether or not it's around, you know, the cost of building and reconstruction work, I don't know. But the fact is that there's not much we can do other than charge on those properties. And as you see from the premium charges, you know, once a property has been empty for a period of, you know, over 5 years and then over 10 years, the money really does jump up to the point you can find yourself paying a 300% premium plus the year's charge, it's 4 times the council tax. Now, you know, on that, other than, you know, raising awareness and you know, keeping an eye on all these, because all these empty properties are regularly inspected by our inspector. So we are aware of them, we do keep an eye on them, but it's very difficult for us to, if you like, encourage the use of them, other than, or the speedy building on those, for those that are going to be redeveloped, other than charging the premium. That is literally almost the only weapon that we do have against long-term, if you like, developers that are waiting for maybe for the market, as I say, to become more buoyant.
Thank you. Can I go to Councillor George, please?
Thank you for your report. Good evening. One thing that I have noticed on here is those that are unfortunate enough to lose someone and their property goes through probate, what allowances or concessions will they have? Because I know from personal experience that probate can take in excess of 1 year. Thank you.
Yes, and there are, the government also introduced, very recently actually, it was the prescribed class of dwellings and consequential amendments, regulations 2024, which I think was November, which basically prevent the council from charging a premium in certain circumstances. And one of those circumstances most certainly is around those that are subject to probate. So with any dwelling, when it's subject to probate, the property is exempt anyway. So it's not until such time as probate is granted and the property transferred to the trustee or to an individual that, if you like, the clock starts running. But even then, there are other options as far as the council is concerned. And for instance, one of the exemptions, the further exemptions that was introduced in November, is around the buoyancy of the market at the moment. And obviously with interest rates over the last couple of years, which again would have had effects on developers because of the cost of building and borrowing money in order to build. The fact is, if a property is taking an extraordinary amount of time to sell, we can look at exempting the property further, even after the grant of probate, and up to a period of another 12 months after that. And even then, there are still other options around the council's discretionary policies, thing that we call Section 13A, and we've used that. It's very much used around individual circumstances, and if there are particular reasons why a property can't be sold or is difficult selling, we do have a number of options still open to us, and we do use those options. We are not trying to penalise in any way, and would never do so. People that are genuinely trying to market a property and struggling. I mean, you know, in the past, I'm just trying to recall off the top of my head, but we've certainly had properties that have been quite, even though they've been left to a family member through probate or whatever it be, but they've been in quite a poor state because maybe that person had previously lived in there for a long time and hadn't done any form of works in the property, and so it's you know, transpired that it's been quite difficult to sell it, even at a kind of below market value. And they're the sort of questions we would ask. We would ask, you know, their estate agent to provide us some information around, you know, what should a property of that nature sell for? What is that property being marketed for? How long is it being marketed? What does the estate agent believe the property, you know, should reach in terms of a value? And what is causing difficulty in terms of selling it? So, you know, we're not looking at something that is very black and white. And we do we do take each case on its own merits. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Can I go on to Councillor Nweki? I believe you wanted to ask a question. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Peter, for the report. I assume that we keep record of empty properties in the district. I just want to find out how often is this updated, and do you have the latest number of empty properties that we have currently? And secondly, or the third question, you mentioned inspection officer. Just want to find out, is that officer a permanent employee of the district of the council? If he is, what is their salary rate in comparison to the amount we're getting back?
Okay, so yes, again, a number of questions. First of all, the inspector will work on basically a 12-week cycle. So we would expect them to visit any property within the district every 12 weeks. And that would be as a minimum. In terms of how much money do we recoup as a result of their salary, I have to say that they are not greatly paid. However, they would most certainly more than, make up for the, in terms of the savings to the council. And you've got to understand, we're not just looking at this, we're not just looking at premiums, we're not just looking at empties. They do a whole host of roles. For instance, they look at all new builds. And if you take just before the council tax setting process, we're building what we call an amount for growth. So growth is the number of properties that we're expecting to come through because we set the council tax back in December, we're looking at a number of additional properties that are likely to come through by the 31st of March. So they stay on the budget for next financial year. Now, there was over 300 properties, new properties, that the inspector had identified altogether. Now, that is a considerable number of council tax charges that we're going to levy. And without that local knowledge, we wouldn't know. So they have a relationship with all developers within the district. So they regularly visit the big developments, and they also statutorily, the local authority has to do what we call serve a completion notice on a property before we can charge an empty rate on the property. The completion notice, not to be confused with a planning completion notice. The completion notice is lodged with the Valuation Office Agency. At that point, it notifies them that the property is coming into circulation and requires banding. Now, again, that is all the role of the inspector. If we didn't have an inspector, we wouldn't have the ability. We would literally just rely on either developers telling us that they've sold properties and developed new properties, and we would rely on owners telling us that they own the property. At which point, we're then very much in arrears, because currently the Valuation Office Agency has a backlog of around about 3 months to 4 months of work. So if we send the property up, literally on the day that someone says, I bought the property today, they're not going to get their council tax bill probably for 4 or 5 months down the line. Whereas the inspector, we can serve completion notices in advance, and we would do so, and we regularly do so. And so, again, that's all part of their role. And it's all around trying to produce a timely bill for the customer, because the customer doesn't want to bill, and when they open the bill, they find out they're 4 months in arrears with their council tax. So, you know, again, the salary that we pay the inspector is well outweighed by the income and the fact that we have to comply with regulations around serving completion notices. Otherwise, we cannot charge on a new empty property. So if you take a new empty property and it's, you know, in Band D, and Band D is, you know, approximately £1,800. If we are not aware of the property being built, we can't serve the completion notice. We can't serve the completion notice. We can't charge the empty rate on that property. So it may well be built by the developer. The developer may not sell it for 6 months. We'd have lost 6 months' income on that property if we didn't serve the completion notice.
Okay.
Sorry, we've got a bit off piece as far as the report is concerned.
Yeah, that's okay. It's easy to digress with these things. Sorry, can I go on to Councillor Kaufman? Do you want to answer the question? Or, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very big subject, this, and at the moment I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable with this because with the world's smallest violin, I'm currently embarked on a programme of updating properties to meet the EPC legislation. And what's got me quite uncomfortable is any house that may have been inherited by a family member that might be, say, an early 1930s, 1940s, through to 1980s development, may well not meet any of the current EPC standards that are coming. I mean, Band C EPC by 2030. I don't think we should be looking at a view that every single person that happens to have a second property is a property developer. They might just be, I suppose, have a little bit of luck. But should we be forcing every single person to be a property developer or effectively a landlord? I mean, I've seen some statistics that say approximately 50% of landlords are likely as not to have to carry out upgrades to properties to meet any of this new legislation. Where's this going to take us? It feels quite uncomfortable. If I was faced with a very big bill to upgrade a 1930s house to EPC standard C, which is air source heat pumps, double glazing, mass insulation, I'd be forced to sell it. And it just doesn't sit right with me that that's the case, especially when on top of that, we've now got the position of the new legislation coming out for tenancies, where you may be just going away for possibly 6 months to a year, and you might find yourself having to give out a new tenancy to someone that you might not necessarily want to do, which will be an open-ended tenancy. So then you've got the aggravation of upgrading your property to meet whatever EPC standard we get at the time, a tenancy that you might not necessarily want, the aggravation of then getting your property back at the end of it, plus any upgrade work you've then got to do to make good after the tenancy. And where it ends up, it just ends up that we're going to be driving people into selling their houses. And last time I checked, our flag was red, white and blue, not red with stars and a hammer and sickle.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for, Jen, can you come back on that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I do have sympathy with the scenarios that you have painted a picture there for, but I think one of the things that Peter said in one of his answers quite early on, that we do have an increasing homelessness issue within the district. We have a very small private rented sector. We don't have enough homes for people. We've got about 1,700 households on the housing register, and the intention of this is not to let properties go unused and to try to bring those back into use, and that is very much the firm intention of the policy.
So I get that, but say that you have a house that's realistically going to be, say, a larger property. I get it. I don't follow the logic of basically, work to upgrade properties is very expensive. I don't necessarily know how anyone's going to afford to upgrade their properties. I mean, have you carried out any research on what the average cost is going to be for smaller properties to get them to any of these standards where they can lawfully be rented out? Because we're just pushing people into a cul-de-sac.
All I would say is that there are a number of options to bring properties back into use, and the intention is not necessarily to turn everybody into a landlord. It's simply to bring a property back into use. And if people have the option to sell, then that, I guess, is what we would be looking for people to do. But that is very much the intention, is to have the homes within the district used.
Okay. Thank you for that. And, Councillor Whitbread, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I have some sympathy with Councillor Kaufman with similar property backgrounds. And of course, the big risk is that you end up discouraging private landlords in the future with anything that pushes them to do certain things. And most landlords want to keep their properties in good order anyway. And the few rogue ones who don't normally get found out very quickly. However, I don't think we should lose the general thrust of this, which is second homes not in use. There's a difference between those and the other issues where the quality of a property or the care to a property has been driven actually, especially on the EPC agenda, by national government. And I have every sympathy with what you're saying, because I can see a lot of people saying enough's enough, I'm out of here for that particular thing. But obviously we do have to look at this, and as you heard earlier on, currently it's bringing in 150,000 a year. That's quite an income for this council to provide those frontline services that we heard about earlier on for CAB. So, but I think we need to look again on that bigger point of what condition of properties and that sort of thing. Well, we can influence it because, as you said, there's been a red flag since July and it's making quite a bit of difference.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, can I go now to Councillor Janet Whitehouse? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Chairman. My question relates to page 25, item 7.1, which says that any premium received by the council has to be shared between this council and the major precepting authorities. Very brief answer would be fine. I presume this is statutory, because otherwise I presume we wouldn't be doing this. So who are the major precepting authorities, and what's the proportion that we would get and the other authorities would get?
Andrew, could you answer that, please?
I mean, it is council tax income, and as I say, that gets distributed amongst all of the people who precept on the overall council tax bill. We can't keep it all just because we've levied the charge. The district council element of that, I think, is about just under 10%, roughly 10%. County council, obviously the largest majority proportion of the overall council tax bill, but police and fire and crime commissioner also take a percentage, and as well, yeah.
And parishes as well? They're not exactly major, are they?
I'm not sure. No, they're not major, so they won't receive a proportion of that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, can I move on to Councillor Nigel Bedford? No. Okay, so we'll finish the discussion at that point. It's been a wide-ranging, interesting discussion. There just remains for us to confirm the recommendations, which are on page 9. The recommendations, paragraph 1.1, A, B, and C. Can we take that as agreed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so item 10. Now, the next item, item 11. Item 11, I said at the beginning of the meeting that we are going to defer that until after item 13. So now we'll go on to agenda item 12. Okay, which is, what's me really? Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the work programme. Oh, sorry. Okay, so just for me to say that members, there will be a meeting.
Chairman, can I just...
Yes, certainly. Please do come in. Yep.
Can I just say something about...
Yes.
Why are we doing... I'm sorry I wasn't at the beginning of the meeting, but I have explained. Why are we doing the whole of the budget in part 2? I would have thought a general discussion of the parameters of the budget and the issues the council is facing and so on should be in part 1. Yes, I fully understand the specifics should be in part 2. I completely understand that, but I just want to be told as a member why we can't have a a general discussion of budgetary issues and so on in part one.
That's fine. That's fine. Councillor Hollywood, if you'd like to come
Thank
back.
you, Chairman. And just to confirm, we will be having a general discussion in part one. So what I plan to do at the Chairman's discretion is work through the budget report as I would in Cabinet. And then in part two, members of the committee can ask any questions on the appendices and savings and issues, private issues, if that's okay.
Apologies, I misunderstood. So the idea is just to have the two items flowing together. Completely misunderstood, and that makes perfect sense.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. So members, there'll be a meeting of this committee on Wednesday, the 26th of February, to cover items initially planned for this meeting, with a further meeting on the 25th of March, when the Youth Council will be invited. So, are there any comments on the work programme? Councillor Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chair. Just want to repeat the point I made at the briefing we had on local government reorganisation, which is, I think it's important that members have an opportunity to discuss and form views on local government reorganisation before many of the key decisions are taken. We've heard the Cabinet have had sort of discussions on this, but I think it should be added to the agenda of this committee for discussion, or indeed potentially at full council. But I think it's important that that happens.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Chris Whitbread, you would like to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I quite agree with Councillor Whitehouse. It's important that the whole council is kept advised of what is going on with LGR, if it happens, if it doesn't happen. We are hoping to get an announcement later on this week in regards to the priority list and whether the county council elections will be postponed next year while devolution takes place, and the mayoral elections will be the year after. There are two dates that we will be circulating for all member briefings being held by the county and district councils representatives to give members a more in-depth idea. There was meant to be one on Monday evening. It was put on hold because we're now expecting the announcement this week, which will put a different complexion on what LGR starts to look like. There is also a meeting of Essex leaders on Friday, which I'll be attending, and I think by then we will start to really build up a proper picture of what's going on and what shape that will take. At the moment, no one knows the number of unitaries that are being considered. It's either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending which idea you favour. And of course, as you heard earlier on, I think actually Councillor Janet Whitehouse's question on the council tax piece was interesting, because at the moment we have a number of major preceptors. When this is all done, it'll be more of a one-stop shop, so one preceptor for all things. And as a council, one of the things we will have to learn is how to deal with the complexities of all tiers of government rather than just what we do at district. And I've said the same at county. County needs to get used to what we do at district. We need to get used to what county does. Lots to learn, lots to do. There will be a lot of importance on all council knowing. I'm also, from a cabinet perspective, looking to set up a portfolio holder advisory group as matters progress.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Leader. Sorry, you want to come back, Councillor Whitehouse?
No, that's helpful. I'm pleased. I think briefings are important because the better informed people are, the better. But a briefing's got the same as a discussion, and I think it should be both, not either or.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's noted. Thank you. Can I welcome Councillor McCann to the meeting? Do you have any declarations at all?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologies for lateness.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay. So, can we then move on to item 13, which is Cabinet Business, pages 80 to 90. So if we can do that, move on to Cabinet Business. So are there any comments or queries on the current programme of key decisions and Cabinet Business? Yeah. Any questions on that one? Again, Councillor Whitehouse. Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman, but I see the Epping Library item went to the Cabinet Agenda Planning Group on 4th November, which is some time ago, but we're still TBC for a Cabinet. I mean, various members have been asking about this over a period, quite an extended period, and it'd be helpful to know where we are.
Okay. Councillor Whitbread, you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chairman. One of the reasons local government needs modernising is the amount of backwards and forwards that you find dealing with different levels. We have got proposals. We know what it would look like. I spoke to the head of property at County only the other day, and there are ongoing discussions, and we are ready to bring a report as soon as we have the final details. But frustrating. It just takes time. You're dealing with... yeah, but we're getting there. And I'd like to, Jen Gould has been working tirelessly on it. The team have been working on it. Bearing in mind, we're at a reduced capacity at the moment as well, and I think it's a good point in time to pick that up. We've got an officer team doing an awful lot of things, including bringing forward a great waste collection service that's been fundamental, doing all these other bits and pieces, preparing difficult financial budgets. Time is pretty short sometimes, and I thank our two lead officers for the amount of extra time they've put into what we do as a council over recent months.
Thank you for that, Leader Councillor Whitbread. Okay, so sorry, Councillor Murray, if you'd like to come in, please.
Questions, Chairman, and they are linked. Page 87. Can I assume that where it says Checkers B development, we're talking about a housing development, and we're talking about one of the sites in Checkers Road? Because I ask because it's a housing issue that I'm interested in, but that's actually in the Roding ward as well. Can I just, it's a little bit unclear, it just says Checkers B development. I'm assuming that means Checkers Road.
Yes, it is.
And then the other one is on page 88, where it says options appraisal for operational sites. Again, I wasn't absolutely sure what that meant. Does that mean a paper looking at what options are available for developing the housing sites that we're unable to develop at this stage? That's my interpretation, but it might be completely wrong.
Yeah, sorry, could you just tell me which page you're looking at for that one again? I just want to make sure.
Page 88, and under expected reports, the heading is options appraisal for operational sites.
Yeah, so we are, so similarly to the stock condition survey that we did last year before, on our housing stock, we are doing the same thing on our operational stock. So this building, Oakwood Hill, Townmead, etc., looking at all of the sort of operational sites that we've got, seeing how they perform, what level of investment that they might need over the course of the coming years, to make sure that we're making best use of those and they're still providing us value for money.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. Okay, can I go to Councillor Janet Whitehouse, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The item on same page, the persistent organic pollutants, what's happening about that? That's got a date of not before 1st of September, but is that progressing? And what exactly is it about? I mean, I know what POPs are, but are you talking about how they're going to be disposed of, or what is the actual focus of that item?
Yeah, thank you.
Just seeing it says collection and transport, which that's obviously the focus of it. But, what's the progress on this? I'm particularly interested in this.
I can take that away, actually, and find out a date for that. So there was some additional sort of requirements that came out about how we treat certain rubbish. But I'll take that away and find out and come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you for that. If there's no more questions or comments on Cabinet business, then I think we can move on to the main thing of the meeting, which is going to be item 11, the budget setting. Okay, which is on page 20, which is on page 27. Pardon? Oh, sorry. Yeah, if you'd like to comment on that, Councillor Hollywood.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully I can get through this without coughing, and sorry for my coughs throughout the meeting. If it's okay in the committee's discretion, what I'd like to do is give a high-level overview of the budget. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to read through the papers, and then in the private session, if we could then move to kind of questions and debate around the private appendices. So I'm very pleased to present this draft budget proposal today for the financial year 2025 and 2026. First, I want to say thank you to Councillor Baldwin and to the committee for allowing this budget to come forward in this way. And so far, it's been a really collaborative way of working together and follows in suit to how we handled the budget last year. And it has been very constructive. And again, thank you everyone for their engagement so far. And I look forward to the insights this evening. Preparing this budget has come with its challenges, as we can tell by the fact it's come at a slightly later stage to scrutiny rather than the traditional way of going to Cabinet first. And I'd like to thank the officers, particularly the finance team, but officers across the council for their hard work and diligence and expertise throughout this process. Before I get into the detail of the paper in front of you, I'd like to highlight a few key points. I think it's helpful with this being a public meeting just to highlight some of these key points. So in terms of council tax, members will be aware that only 13% of our budget comes from council tax. The majority of our budget relies on grants, income from sources like commercial premises like Epping Forest Shopping Park, also car parking charges, repayments from loans from Qualis, and recharges to the housing revenue account. However, this year we have faced very significant challenges due to the reduced government grant under the new Labour government, and what we have seen from the government is a redistribution of grants. So essentially areas like Epping Forest are receiving less and inner city areas are receiving more. So this has been not unexpected but very frustrating, and obviously has had a direct impact on our budget. The other thing I'd like to address is the Google money, because it's been a subject of a lot of social media comment. So as you recall, it was great news when we received £88 million for selling a small part of Northfield Airfield to Google for a data centre. This project will bring in jobs and is fantastic news for the district. It's really important to stress that this money has not been spent, and this money can only be spent on capital projects. And there are no plans to allocate this money in the next financial year. However, it should be noted that this money is really important in underpinning our budget due to the interest payments that we're getting from the money sitting in our account. So I think that was an important point to note. And in terms of value for money, I would also like to highlight that under this budget, Epping Forest District Council will cost the average Band D taxpayer £172 per year. People often see us send in the bill and kind of think we're the ones responsible for all of that, when in reality we're only responsible for a small proportion of the annual bill. And even with a 2.99% increase, that's an extra £4.99 a year. And I think it should be stressed that I still believe we get good value for that £172. You get excellent waste collection services, as well as the additional services we provide, from the Youth Council to Highways Rangers. And I don't claim to be an economist like Rachel Reeves, but this budget does demonstrate our commitment to financial responsibility. And our aim is simple, and it's always been our aim to balance the books and deliver the best value for the local taxpayer. Now turning to the details of the report in front of you, you will see from this report and understand from previous meetings that this year's budget process has been very demanding. The updated medium-term financial plan reveals an initial deficit of £1 million for the General Fund and £276,000 for the Housing Revenue account. Further challenges have risen due to a lower than expected government grant settlement, rise in operational costs including utilities and contracted services, national policy changes such as the national insurance contributions, as well as inflationary pressures which affect our services and supplies. And like our household income budgets, this is something we've all seen across the board and has been a challenge over the past few years. So in this report, which we're looking at today, we're proposing 1.45 million of savings and a 2.99% increase in council tax, as I said before. Key measures to make savings in this draft budget will be discussed in private session, but I would like to stress for this public session that we have very much taken on board the previous comments of scrutiny and the debate we had just before Christmas and other debates in meetings. It should also be stressed, and as I said when Citizen Advice gave their report and question this evening, that we have very much noted and considered their concerns. And we will update fully when we finalise the budget. As part of this budget process, we have prioritised minimising the impact on council jobs, recognising the strain reduction in workforce capacity can place on services. We heard earlier about some of the challenges we already have in this area. Where possible, we will continue to identify in-year savings or use the transformation revenue reserve to preserve essential skills. This is going to be particularly important with local government reform potentially on the horizon. It should also be noted that this budget accounts for the transfer of the new car park in Epping from Qualis back to Epping Forest District Council. While the financial impact is neutral overall, the operational costs have been included in the budget for transparency, and I'm sure we'll have questions around this, and Councillor Matthews, I know, will be happy to comment further. Just to briefly touch on the capital programme, which is included within the budget. The proposed capital programme for totals 50.79 million for 2025 and 2026, and with 40.38 million allocated for the upcoming year. And the development of the new state-of-the-art Epping Leisure Centre, which as the ward councillor I'm particularly excited about, is fantastic news for Epping and the wider district, and an example as how as a council we go above and beyond. Another example of capital spending within this report is the air traffic control tower at North Weald. This is vital because it means, as we have always committed as a council, North Weald Airfield remains flying. Briefly on the housing revenue account, which is equally important to us as a council, we still have a significant housing stock, and as Jen Gould highlighted earlier, a lot of people in need of housing, and those who are already in the housing in need of upgrades to housing and estates. The HRA budget anticipates a deficit of £277,000 this year, which will be covered by surplus HRA balances, and this ensures we can maintain and improve the housing stock while managing pressures, including pay awards and inflationary increases. Also, the £200,000 stock condition survey, which means we can make the best of our council assets and ensure they're up to standard. The HRA capital programme, which I've talked about many times over the year, totals £143 million over 5 years, with 38 million allocated for 2025/2026. And this is money for improving housing standards and services, as well as our council house building programme, which we remain proud of as a council. And unlike many councils across the country, we have delivered new council homes on brownfield sites. So it's very clear from the report that we do have many challenges ahead, including a very significant projected funding gap for the following financial year. And there is still a lot of uncertainty. Local government reform is really at the key to this. Of course, the financial strain on councils is a key driver for the government for local government reform. And in my view, if local government reform is done right, it could be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to streamline services and eliminate duplication across Essex, and hopefully save money and deliver better services for residents. So to prepare for this, we'll review our transformation programme to assure alignment with any future unitary structures and focus resources where they are most needed. So as we all know, setting a council budget in the current economic climate is very difficult, and it means making tough decisions. And as Andrew will know from reviewing the papers, we are constantly treading a fine tightrope. One change here means a change somewhere else. Protecting one service means that you have to consider what you're doing with another service. So this evening, I would very much welcome your feedback, your comments. Obviously, we will debate the suggested savings in the private session. What I would stress is that this is still the draft budget. We're still open to listening. We still want to hear the views of Scrutiny, and it's not the final budget until the final budget is presented, as much as I'm sure Andrew will not like me saying that. So very much open this evening. What I am really pleased that we can do is present a balanced budget. Ultimately, that is the key thing. As a council, we always aim to be financially responsible. We want to provide excellent services, but we need to make sure we're balancing those books. So I present this budget to you, this draft budget to you, and I await your comments. I've also got Mr. Small here this evening for any complicated technical questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your detailed report. And now can I open it up to the committee for questions and comments? And so, Councillor Lyon, if you'd like to ask a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very simple question. You talked about the Google money and the interest. That interest can go back into the general fund and be used not necessarily for capital projects?
Thank you. And yes, that's true. So if we spend the money, it can only be spent on capital projects, but the interest is being used ultimately to fund services at present. Thank you.
For that. Yep. Are there any other questions and comments at all from the committee regarding the draft budget? Yeah, Councillor Murray.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from the sorry, I'm having a bad day. The councillor from Waltham Abbey, Tom, about the impact of Cottage Lane multi-storey car park on the budget, please. I know it's referenced in the report, but we do have a line on page, wherever it is, but I can't find it now, but we've all read it. Page, is it 36? Can you just take us through the impact of that decision on the budget?
Yeah, Councillor Matthews, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I obviously spoke at Cabinet at length about the rationale behind what we was trying to do and the fact that this is sort of a business decision and also touched very much on the importance of the language. I would just like to take the opportunity to repeat myself to members here this evening that obviously wasn't at Cabinet. We're talking about the car park coming back into the council ownership. The language around this is very key. Obviously, in the reports, it talks about a sale or purchase. It's actually just a transfer. We own Qualis, the council owns Qualis, therefore we own the debt they have and the debt they acquire and the assets that are within there. We're talking about a transfer of title rather than a sale. So the car park is to come back to EFDC and the debt will then be wiped out. So it's a transfer rather than a sale. In terms of the impact on the budget, obviously we know we're able to use the operational costs from Qualis. The benefit of obviously wholly owning that is that we can see what things actually cost us exactly at the moment. We know the parking income is around 288,000. We know our running costs of the park is around 201,000. So there is a net profit there of 87,000. Unfortunately, the problem that occurs for Qualis is there's then an interest of 1,020,000 because of the loan that they've acquired. So again, that's why this is a business decision that needs to be made to actually move that back across. Obviously, with those numbers I've just mentioned there, that leaves the deficit for Qualis at 970,000. So that is, at Cabinet, I asked for that to be considered in relation to the budget going forward. And as you can see from the figures there, we've worked out where that's going to be for the council and how that will be budgeted going forward. It's very much a case of it's either in this pot or this pot. So it's either going to be sat in on Qualis's P&L sheet or it's going to be sat in the council. Either way, it's going to come back to the council to deal with this at some point in the future. So the reason that I've pushed for this to move now and to progress and do the transfer of title is so that it sits within the council, so we're not just acquiring more and more debt within Qualis. I don't know if Mr. Small would like to add any to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, obviously it's one of the biggest and largest items in the overall budget package, really, and created a problem in terms of balance in the overall budget this year, really, and that was drawn out within the cover report. I think the important thing is, and I think Councillor Matthews has made this point, is that I don't think it really matters whether the council acquires the title for the car park or not. Knowing that the car park is losing this amount of money, the council needs to recognise it within its overall financial envelope. So either way, wherever the council sit in terms of ownership, the council will still have to provide the same amount of money in this overall budget package. And I think, in terms of the Cabinet's consideration of that item, you're going to have to provide for it anyway. If you're going to have to put that amount of money into your budget, then maybe having operational control of that car park comes with some other operational benefits in terms of managing the way it's operated. And also the council doesn't have to lose or pay VAT on the car parking income, as Qualis would do as a private entity. So there are some advantages financially as well as the car park being in the council's control. But, as I say, I think almost you can disregard the issue about who owns it. The important thing, I think, for this budget package is it needs to be reflected within the overall budget envelope that's presented here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Murray, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm not an accountant and I'm not an economist. So why, even if we hadn't, even if the Cabinet hadn't decided at the last meeting to call it to purchase, which of course, as I understand tonight has been called in, I've read somewhere it's been called in, we're saying that it would have had to been recognised within the budget anyway, but it wasn't in the medium term figures that we got in October. It wasn't included. So why, when Qualis owned it before that decision, was it not reflected in an earlier draft of the budget?
Thank you. Do you want to reply?
Yes, I'll answer that one. I think it's because the true cost of operating that car park, has only recently been crystallised, I suppose, or understood. After about a full year's worth of trading activity, we kind of realise what the actual operational deficit of it is. I think when we put the draft budget together back in October time, it wasn't really understood enough sufficiently to put a number into the budget proposal at that point in time. It was only the work that's taken place since that has enabled us to understand and realise, I suppose, that even the impact on the Qualis overall business plan and trading position, isn't sustainable in a Qualis space, and the council would need to take control of that, really. And I suppose, as I say, it's developed since we put the draft budget together. Really, it's probably the kind of the basis of that, of the response to yourself.
Further comment. I do accept that down the line it would come back and hit the council, but I'm not sure that we wanted to take the hit this year. I'm not convinced that it was the right decision to take the hit this year. We've been told about all the difficulties we're facing. We know what some of the difficult decisions are facing us in the private discussion, and I'm not convinced that this was the year to do this.
Yeah, Councillor Matthews, if you'd like to come back, please.
Thank you, Councillor Murray, for your comments, and I'll endeavour to do my best because, like yourself, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an economist, so I'm trying to explain this as simple as possible in layman terms so that most of us can understand and the public viewing online can understand. It's a case, you will recall from the Cabinet I mentioned, about responsible lending for me. The council is lending money to Qualis. If we was in a commercial environment, a commercial bank lending to a commercial customer has a duty of care and responsibility on how they're lending money. If that bank, in this case us, was to become aware that they're lending money to something that isn't sustainable, they would have to be starting to make provisions. So what Mr. Small is saying, this would have to be factored in. Now that it's fully laid out and we're fully aware of the situation with the car park, it would be absolutely irresponsible of this council to not do anything and say, do you know what, it's not great time to do it this year, let's kick the can down the road, we'll review it next year when it's a bigger problem or the year after when it's an even bigger problem. What we're saying is, even if, hypothetical situation, even if the car park didn't transfer, we would have to factor that into the budget now, because that would be the responsible thing to do, because we know that money would be, that interest would be piling up, that debt would be incurring. So that knock-on effect, we would have to factor that in now going forward. So I hope that makes sense. It's a case of being responsible. If we was to turn around and go, do you know what, car park stays with Qualis, the same numbers need to be put into this budget, because when we do eventually stop kicking that can, we will have to have that money available. So we would need to do that work this year and the following year and the following year. So it's a case of, it's neither here nor there. This needs to happen, and it's a case of being responsible as a lender, as the council. So I hope that makes a bit more sense for you. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Just one more question.
Yep, please come back.
Do we have the option to build it in over 2 years rather than take it all in the 1 year?
My strong advice to the council, scrutiny and to cabinet would be no. I think, once you know that the car park is losing this amount of money, you need to deal with it as soon as you recognise that's the situation. So I think it needs to be reflected into the overall budget envelope now. To not do so would just mean that you'd have to find more money the following year, I suppose, to make up the amount you're not paying for now.
Thank you. Right, can we go to Councillor George, please? Yep.
Couple of things, actually. First of all, Councillor Matthews, sorry. You were saying, I know I'm blind now, I haven't got my glasses on. You were saying about Qualis is part of the council's part of Qualis. I get that. But Qualis is an entity on its own. So it's a company on its own. So their accounts is separate to EFDC's. Now, EFDC do own the shares outright, and they are in full control, I take, yeah. So why can't Qualis have the car park on their profit and loss account as a loss, and then offset against profits coming in further down the line? So why does it have to be transferred over, so all that absorbed into 1 year, which is having a knock-on effect with other services and things going on, that to me, it just doesn't seem right. So there is a difference. There is a profit and loss for Qualis. There is a profit and loss for EFDC. The thing is, with Qualis, we're not privy to the accounts. We're not privy to the meetings. We're not privy to the meeting minutes. So when was this decided that this was going to be transferred back into EFDC? Because I haven't seen any minutes or aware of any minutes regarding this. So it is really important where it sits. So Qualis is causing a loss, and I think to absorb it in 1 year and so quickly, otherwise we look at it on a sliding scale. Maybe you guys know better than I. Why does it have to be just in 1 year? It's a lot of money, 978,000. So two separate entities, I know that they're together. Thank you.
Councillor Matthews, have you come back, please?
Thank you very much for your questions there. First one, you spoke about why can't it just sit on Qualis's P&L? It basically cripples their functionality. They can't do the other jobs and the other services we're asking them to do with that sat there. It's also, although, as you rightly say, it either sits on Qualis or it sits on the council, they're also treated very differently. Obviously, one being a council and one being a private company. So it's very important for the functionality of Qualis to enable them to continue doing the developments we're asking them to do and delivering on the objectives within the Qualis business plan, that they have the freedom to do that. If they've sat with an asset that's just losing money and they're ever increasing debt, that just completely cripples their functionality. In terms of absorbing in 1 year, it isn't a case, this is an annual cost, so it's not a case of absorbing it all in 1 year and then it doesn't occur again. If it stays the same, it's that this year, then that plus again the next year and the next year and the next year. This is why I'm saying it's of the utmost importance that we address the issue now, and we have to factor that in now, because if we don't factor it in this year, we'll be factoring in twice the amount next year and 3 times the amount the year after that. So it's ever increasing. If we was in a situation where, you know, we had the mythical crystal ball and everything worked out how we thought it would when Qualis was originally conceived, there would have been multiple other projects that would have been earning lots of money. So when we ended up with the car park not producing the income everyone expected it to, and when I mean everyone, I will just reference back one of the things I mentioned in the cabinet meeting. I actually saw a paper from Carter Jonas, obviously widely respected nationwide company, who predicted at the in the development phases of it that it would be generating £1 million profit. And now we're obviously here discussing an operational loss of 900,000 or 970,000 a year. So it was, the circumstances have changed so drastically, and what I would love to have happened would be if none of the other circumstances had changed affecting the other development and the other projects that Qualis got going on, Qualis would be able to potentially swallow a little bit more of those losses. But where we're kind of fighting fires in every department, we're in a situation where we need to make a sensible decision. So from my Qualis perspective, we need to make sure that Qualis is functioning so it can continue to deliver the objectives we've asked it to do. And then from the council's perspective, we've got to be responsible. And as Mr. Small is saying, whether it's done, whether it's there or there, we need to start factoring it into our budget going forward, because otherwise, when it does come home to roost, if members are inclined for that to be this year, next year, the year after, when it comes home to roost, it will be the total times however many years it's been. So we've got to start allocating that money, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
I kind of hear what you're saying and kind of makes sense, but with Qualis being an entity on its own and legal standing, yeah, so the council and the budget, and so the P&L from both companies, like public versus private. You said on your 13th of Jan meeting at Cabinet, I turned up late, I just happened to turn up because I could, and you said that commercially it's really good, so you're going to be going through that avenue. So why then, thinking about the offset of 978,000 per year, either why don't you just get rid of the car park? If it's a loss and it's causing so much detriment, why do you not just let it go, let someone else buy it? So then therefore you're saving 978,000, or Qualis puts it on their profit and loss because it is a separate accounting system and it is separate. And the commercially of the other branches of Qualis, if the commercial aspect is doing so well, why then is it not pouring that money into another sister company, which it is, companies altogether in different branches, that are propping up that company to bring in more revenue? So I do think it needs to be looked at, and the idea of all that money coming over then year after year after year, then no doubt you guys are putting your heads together to think, right, we can't keep having this loss per year, every year, there has to be a reduction. So how are we going to make that reduction so the community, i.e. the public purse, doesn't suffer? Because at the moment, the public purse will be suffering year after year after year. Thank you.
Councillor Matthews, yeah.
Thank you. Firstly, if we was to sell off every asset the council has that doesn't generate money and put us in a good position, our residents would be in a far, far worse position. So not everything we do can be to make massive amounts of profit. As much as I would like that to be the case, that isn't the case at all. If we was to go down the route of leaving it on the Qualis P&L, as I said, it just cripples what they're doing. I hear your point completely about the commercial side more. I would love it if there was enough money in the pot that it was bringing it up. It could do that, but we'd still be in the position where we're deciding what's best. I think there's a lot of reasons moving forward that it's best that that car park is now in our ownership. Gives us more control and different avenues we can go to tackling antisocial behaviour, gives us better control over the charges and what we do. We're obviously, in terms of moving forward to the future and looking for upturn, have to remember this was part of a two-stage approach. There was this and the development of the sports centre. Obviously, the sports centre is going to require a lot of parking, so we're hoping those figures I read you earlier actually start going through the roof. Obviously, with all situations like this, you can either cut back or you can earn more. I would very much advocate we earn more, and that puts us into a more profitable position. So once that happens, as I said, that the figure that's killing Qualis at the moment is the interest. That is what's really killing Qualis at the moment. So if the council, which is going to be focusing on a much, obviously the Qualis is looking at 3-year, 5-year, 10-year plan. Council, we're looking, obviously, scratch the whole devolution and everything else going on at the moment, but we're looking at a much longer picture. We've developed that car park to support the residents of this district for the next 20 years. So it's on a much longer term that we can look at these things, rather than a private company that's got to look at it in a much shorter window. So I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a real long-term benefit to the residents. We've developed a new sports centre, which is on target, on budget, looking fantastic, and we've got the same quantity of parking spaces as we had before, now within a smaller space. And also it's worth noting as well, not all of the space was originally used, for the multi-storey, so we've still got the section next to the multi-storey, which will also be coming back under the ownership of the council, which has a value of about 1.3 million in terms of land value. So there's that added value coming back onto the council balance sheet as well, which again gives us the options. We could do various different things with that, but it gives us the control of that again, where at the moment we're saying to Qualis, what can you do with it, when they haven't got the money in the pot to do anything else with it. Unless it's very profitable project, they can't rely on other projects to prop that up. Does that make sense? I don't know if Mr. Small wants to add anything to that.
Not really. I think you've given a full and comprehensive answer. I'm just to remind members, I suppose, the council has lent Qualis the money to build that car park, and we have to consider their ability to repay that. If they're making a loss on the car park, then us continuing to benefit from the interest they're paying us whilst they're racking up a debt isn't long-term sustainable. In fact, it's not even sustainable in the short term. So hence my earlier comment about the need for us to recognise the fact that they haven't got the means from the car park to repay the loan that the council gave them to build the car park. And I think you mentioned the point about disposal or sale of the car park, which is fair. But I mean, if the car park is only making £100,000 a year, how much would an average investor be prepared to pay for that car park? Certainly not the amount of money that it cost to build. So sale wouldn't net enough money to repay the debt to the council.
Thank you very much for that. Can I go over to Councillor Holly Whitbread, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and I don't want to repeat the points that Councillor Matthews made very eloquently, but I think it is just worth stressing that if we had a crystal ball, this wouldn't have happened, and it is unfortunate the economy turned as it has. So, without a doubt, this is not ideal, but we're taking the financially responsible steps to safeguard both ourselves and Qualis, which is financially interdependent in many ways with the council. And I would say this sports centre was built to enable the leisure centre. You don't get the leisure centre without the sports centre. And I think that is a point that people must remember. But people must also remember that the leisure centre will make the car park busier because people will be using the car park more readily. And what I would say, and I don't want to stray too far away from the budget debate, but as a ward councillor, I've previously expressed my disappointment at Qualis's management and some of the issues around the car park. So as a ward councillor, I do have to say that I do feel more confident in the district council's management of it, and actually the fact that they can look at different things like charges and bring it in line with our management across the district. But the other point I just quickly wanted to raise, because I think it's important that we touch on it, is around the transparency of Qualis's finances, because there were comments alluding to the fact that Qualis wasn't transparent. But I think it is important to say we receive quarterly financial performance and monitoring reports. We receive business plans. Qualis regularly come to both Scrutiny and Cabinet, and I'm sure if we ask them to, they'd be happy to come to full council as well. So, Qualis accounts are there to be looked at, to be scrutinised, as is their business plan and their intentions. So I don't think this kind of shroud of secrecy argument particularly holds up. And I would also say there's council representation on the board. Councillor Bassett is chairman of the board, and Councillor Kaufman also sits on the board as well. So there is council input into shaping Qualis. I think it's just a really important point to emphasise, and that there are no backhanders going to councillors. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Can I go over to Leader Councillor Chris Whitbread, please?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Holly Whitbread and to Councillor Tim Matthews for their explanation of the car park issue. I think the other thing that members have to bear in mind, when we're talking about car parks, no car parks in the Epping Forest area are actually making the income they used to make at the present time. In fact, none of them since the pandemic have been performing at the levels we would have expected. Incomes have fallen. We have car parks for many reasons, and hopefully to boost the local economy as well. It would be quite easy to go to a company, offer the multi-storey car park for sale, but I know one thing for definite, and this would affect the whole of the local economy: car parking prices would shoot through the roof, and that would happen. So whilst this is a difficult decision, very well explained by my colleagues, it's the right decision for Epping Forest at this time. It's the right decision to protect local businesses and the local economy. And in the long term, it will be an asset to us once the sports centre opens and we start, hopefully, bit by bit, returning to a post-pandemic world where car usage is back to its old self again. And I can remember the days we used to have 85 to 90% occupation of our car parks. It's nowhere near that today, but it's getting busier, and we need that to happen. But remember, this doesn't just apply to the multi-storey car park. This applies to car parks all across Epping Forest. So if you talk about disposing of one because it's not making money, what about all the others? It's, you know, there are no easy solutions to this. Colleagues have really struggled with it, and I know officers have really struggled with it as well. But you've had a very clear reasoning behind it, not only from members, but also from the 151 officer, who has to make sure that we follow the correct framework for our finances. And that's what we've heard this evening.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, do you want to come back?
Thank you. The reason why we're focusing about Qualis at the moment in the car park is that this has had a significant impact on our budget this year that we didn't know about in October. So this is essentially a debate about the budget, because there are at least 3 items within the appendices that I can't support, and they're relatively small beer compared to this amount of money. So that is why this is such a key issue. We've just heard from the officer that no private company would be buying the car park in the conditions of I don't mean the material condition, you know, in the situation it is at the moment, the finances around it, but we are. Members have to remember that the Cabinet did not have an independent assessment of the value of that car park. I accept that no real money in the sense of pounds, shillings and pence has been transferred over, but the impact on our budget is there. So there's just so many things that I'm unhappy about that you know, I don't think I can add anything else. But the reason why we've focused on this, or the reason why I have, and I would imagine the councillor from Epping has, is that this has had... There are other factors as well. I could talk about the waste management contract and the extra £1 million capital that had a significant knock-on effect in revenue. That really, I accept that we had no choice where we were, but I don't think we should ever have got there. But this is the key one, and I don't think we've got it right, and I don't think that we would have to be making all the decisions that we might be being asked to support in appendix, whatever it is, the private appendix, would flow. So that's the reason why I've certainly focused on the car park issue.
Okay, thank you for that. Yep, Councillor Matthews would like to come back.
Thank you. I just want to really address Councillor Murray's comment and say I completely appreciate and welcome the level of scrutiny that's been put forward tonight, because it is a very, very important issue. It's something that I've been doing a lot of work on recently, as I'm sure you can imagine, and there's endless discussions and conversations and planning and different projections and working out all the different scenarios and calculating the levels of risk with that. Conversations with Mr. Small to all hours of the evening, which I thank you. I take the opportunity tonight to thank him for. It is a very, very important decision. It does have a big impact on this budget, and it is difficult. It is a difficult decision we're looking at here. But as I've said, and I will say it again, if we don't make the decision, it's a bigger problem next year, and a bigger problem. If we was to factor in half the amount, then that additional half will have to be addressed the following year, and the issue just compounds again and again and again. So we are where we are. I would very much love us not to be in this situation. And as I said, if we had a crystal ball 5 years ago, however many years ago, you would have looked at this. If you'd known what we know now, different decisions would have been made, of course, and I'm sure people can say that about every aspect of the financial budget we're looking at this evening, and about every aspect of their personal lives. Things have changed so much in this post-pandemic world, and we really are still seeing the impacts of that, because these long-term projects that basically take years to come to fruition, it then takes years to actually really feel the impact, and that's what we're doing. As Mr. Small said, once it became apparent what the issue is we were dealing with, it comes down to a responsibility thing, and although it's a difficult decision to make, and yes, completely agree, when we're looking at other elements that might have to make difficult decisions on, this does have a bearing. I completely agree, and it's right to scrutinise that, but it would be wholly irresponsible for this council to just kick the can down the road and say, do you know what, we know there's a huge growing problem over here, but we're just going to leave that till next year, or we're going to address 50% and then we'll address the remaining 50% the year after. It just would be really irresponsible, and that's purely talking from a financial position, that we take all the politics out of it, we take all the party politics and everything else away from the situation. If we just look at the numbers that are on the table in front of us and the advice that we've received from Mr. Small, this is the situation we have to deal with, and unfortunately we're tasked with having that difficult decision. But I do appreciate the level of scrutiny, because I think it 100% warrants it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I go over to Andrew Small, please?
Thank you, Chair. But I think actually Councillor Matthews has just made the point I was going to make far more eloquently than probably I would have done. But you know, I am your Section 151 officer. I have a duty to the whole council. It would have made my life a whole lot easier not to have included this number within the budget proposal, and you know, would have reduced the amount of difficult choices. But it is a significant item. But equally, as Councillor Matthews says, once you're aware that it's an issue, you can't. Well, it's not. I would have been remiss and neglecting my duties to you as a council if I didn't make sure that it was adequately provided for within the overall budget, which is why it's here, unfortunately. Thank you.
If there's no more comments or questions from the committee, can I open it up to other councillors present? And I think Councillor Brooks, you've been very patient. Did you have a question at all?
By the time
okay.
He's asked the same question, so I'm not going to repeat it.
That's fine then, yeah. Okay. Can I go over to Councillor John Whitehouse, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I want to sort of step back from the detail, because I think one of the striking things about this budget is how much has changed. You know, just in bits of the budget look nothing like last year's budget. It's not just an incremental change. It's really big things on the income side, for example, a change from one form of government grant to another, big wodge of cash from the extended producer levy, or whatever it's called, which looks great, and you think, well, that mitigates some of the government grant reduction. and then you see we've got to meet increased waste costs for the waste collection, and at some stage it'd be useful to understand more about that. But I want to sort of focus on and I appreciate that all these changes mean a lot of work for those involved in preparing the budget. I wanted to concentrate on a couple of, sort of the big items. I mean, the transformation reserve has been a sort of ongoing issue for a number of years because it's never really clear to me where the £3 million came from. We never quite saw a breakdown of what that was earmarked for. And I think it's entirely understandable why we're no longer putting money into the transformation reserve, and why some transformation projects, we touched on this a bit at the last scrutiny meeting, why some of the transformation projects alluded to at the last scrutiny meeting perhaps no longer are appropriate. I'm still not very clear on how much of the current transformation reserve is unallocated and how much is allocated and how much is essential for delivering this budget, depending on the saving decisions later and not. And I think that would be helpful to know. Certainly the transformation reserve came to the rescue last year when it was necessary, or when members wanted to mitigate the effects of some of the proposed savings. On the Cottis Lane issue, which, as people have said, has got a massive impact on this year's budget. First of all, I think it's important to separate the operational side from the ownership side. From setting aside the financial issues, you don't need to own it to operate it. To operate it, you don't need to own it. The ownership is a financial issue. I mean, I sort of listen carefully, to what's been said. I entirely understand that you can't ignore an issue. These things have to crystallise at some point. I think there is still some sort of scope to understand a bit more about what an appropriate vision would be if the acquisition didn't take place. How that be calculated. It clearly needs to take account of the various risks and quite how the loan arrangement operated. I'm sort of conscious that the interest rates, I think, are due to change on the loan agreement at some point. I'm also conscious of what Councillor Matthews was saying about the potential increase in income from the car park. I'm not quite sure how that factors into the future calculations. So I think there is more to understand and discuss about this, but obviously, as someone alluded to, that may be possible to do through the call-in process. I've got other things to say but they relate to the appendices, so I'll save that for later. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Can I go to Andrew Small, please?
I think, for members' benefit generally, and Councillor Holly Whitbread made the point earlier, this has been, I think it sounds a bit hollow, I recognise this because I say it every year, it has been one of the most challenging budgets I've ever had to settle. And that's because of the sheer number of large, uncertain items that have been moving around and materialised late within the overall budget development process that needed to be accommodated. And it has made it particularly challenging, I think, in terms of actually delivering a balanced budget. And one that, has necessitated some savings we would all rather not have to make, really. And those indeed come on top of two prior years' worth of having to make more challenging savings than we would have liked. And I think there is something about the overall financial landscape for local government which is particularly challenged at this point in time. And I think we also need to be realistic about the prospect for that improving dramatically in the near future, which I don't think it will. If anything, it will get more challenging still. I'll stop using the word challenging, but it's kind of a reflection of the situation. There is a conversation about LGR and whether this is not just inevitable but also necessary to deliver not just improved services but also financial resilience for councils now. Because generally I don't think the country as a whole has the money to provide the services that residents want whilst costs are rising and council tax is still restrained, I think, to amounts that don't cover our increasing costs each year. So it's a difficult space, one that needs to be addressed, one that needs the council to face up to its responsibilities and take the decisions. You know, what those decisions are is a matter of choice, but the total amount that it needs to find isn't going to change, I think, fundamentally. Transformation reserve is a question that Councillor Whitehouse asked in terms of the balance on that. The majority of it is available at this point in time. I think there's some work to do just to finalise that and clarify that, and we'll do that. But I believe the number is probably in the order of 2 million out of what will be 3, I think, by the end of this financial year, in more probability, given the forecast underspend that we talked about earlier in the Q3 position. So that gives the council some flexibility, which I think will be particularly useful in the future, given the the uncertainty that lies ahead of us, and to help us move our way through to LGR, if that is indeed what the future holds in store for us. I think that's probably all I wanted to say, and probably hand over to Councillor Holly Whitbread if she wants to come in.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for clarifying those points. I think with the transformation piece, and Councillor Whitbread, the other Councillor Whitbread may want to comment on this further, but this money could also potentially be pretty important in terms of local government reform, and I think that's something we need to bear in mind when looking at the budget. I'm going to pass over to Councillor Whitbread to comment further. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, of course, transformation was a very important factor to this council and councils all across Essex in recent times. But of course, with the changes that we now face, pursuing a transformation programme when so much of what we do will change would be folly at one level now, although we've made some good progress and made some good partnerships. So there's been some really good work done, particularly with Colchester and Braintree, and particularly in the technology area, which will hold us in good stead for the future. And we've also got some good relationships building from shared services in HR as well. So there has been some positives to what we've done, but of course transformation was very much going to be about the digital space and what we hope to achieve there. Obviously it frees up the transformation fund somewhat at the moment. However, my warning is that LGR will cost an awful lot of money. As these things always do, there are costs involved, and as you've just heard earlier on when I spoke about capacity, there will be the need to build capacity as well. Obviously, there will be 15 councils going through this process of change, because at the end of it there will be no county council, no district councils, no borough councils, no city councils. Nothing happens to the towns and parishes. They sit there as they currently are, but the real change is in that upper tier of authorities, and this is fundamentally going to change everything. And it's as Andrew has said very clearly, the challenges of local government finance aren't going to get any easier. And what was set out in October as part of the budget and the figures that we started to receive in December, it means a real change for us as councils. That's where the real problems lie now, is the distribution of grants and the redistribution of grants, more importantly.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I go to Councillor Murray, please? Yep.
It's just two quick questions. It was something the officer just said and I didn't quite pick it up. What was he saying that by the end of the financial year the transformation budget will be sitting at?
I believe with planned contributions during 24-25 that we'll be up towards the £3 million mark that we targeted originally, and that means that'll be available potentially. Most of it will be potentially available for repurposing. I would think.
And I didn't see when I first read these papers whenever it was, but I've just had a quick look and I can't find the line now. So could you just point to me the line where the page where the transformation budget is? The line in the budget, because I just can't find it quickly.
It essentially sits outside of the budget, is a reserve, but there is a contribution to it in 24-25's budget, and there was a contribution in the draft for 25-26, but that's been removed, as explained within the cover report.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Matthews, if you'd like to...
Thank you, Chairman. It was just to come back to Councillor Whitehouse on the point he made regarding the car park. I firstly apologise for my inexperience, and I'm not au fait with this call-in process and how that will work out if that does proceed. But I heard you mention it in your speech there, and I just wanted to say that however this process pans out, I will say what I've said this evening again and again and again, whether it was at Cabinet, whether it's now, or whether it's multiple other meetings going forward. I apologise for those that will get tired and bored of my voice, but unfortunately it is what it is, and I will be in the position of just repeating myself again and again. I understand the comments you made around third party and ownership, and you haven't got to own it to operate it, etc., etc. Obviously, when looking at things like that, you need to review the position you're in. We would not be in a strong position to negotiate in the open market if we was to go out to the market and look at someone else to manage it. The beauty we have with Qualis is we can steer Qualis. Qualis hasn't got to make a set margin that is answerable to a wide range of shareholders in the commercial sphere. They're answerable to us. So if we turn around and say operate it at zero margin, that's what they will do. Whereas any external third party will have its shareholders that it's responsible to. I would estimate they'd be wanting to look at 8%, 10% returns on their investment. So I think Councillor Whitbread mentioned it earlier. The only thing you would see is an absolute skyrocket in prices, so that anyone else that had any involvement with that car park made it a lot more viable, and that is obviously hugely detrimental to our residents. So any move towards that, or any sort of step towards involving a third party that will be looking to make profit, will be making profits off the back of our residents, and that's the beauty we've got with Qualis. We don't have to have that situation. We can prevent that being the situation, but unfortunately we still are faced with the financial position we're in, and even if we was to have the operational side of it taken away from Qualis, we'd still be in a position where, with the situation of the loan they have got and the repayments they're making to us, if they can't afford to be making those repayments, we would be irresponsible to continue lending them that money, knowing that they're just accumulating more and more debt that will eventually we'll have to swallow if that all comes home to roost. So hopefully that covers a few points for you on your thoughts there. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. It's been a long and wide-ranging discussion. Are there any more questions or comments at all from the committee or other councillors present? Councillor Lyon.
Yeah, just quickly, on the local government reform, I think we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that we are going to have to prepare, and I think that's what's been discussed. So whatever we do, we're going to continue, I'm asking the question, are we going to continue to finance in the way that we've done so until we know we have to stop or have to change it? So at the moment we're continuing, and then at a point in the next year we need that fund to be able to change.
Councillor Holly-Whitbread.
Thank you, Councillor Lyon. I think that's a really good question. I mean, the good thing is that we should know whether it's going to happen or not in the next week. But whether it happens now or whether it happens in a couple of years, it's the direction of travel from the government. So I think in terms of kind of shared services, working towards local government reform and transformation, I think that's something we've always got to be mindful of. Equally, we need to be mindful about how we run the council and make it more efficient, which transformation, as you know, that's essentially what is at its core. So the answer to your question is yes, but the good thing we'll know in a week's time or so whether we're going to be part of the first tranche. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no more comments or questions, there are on page 29, there are recommendations, decisions required, which is paragraphs. Should I go for private session first? Oh, okay, sorry. So yes, so can we agree committee, can we agree to go into private session, exclusion of public and press?
Sorry,
Councillor Murray.
just before you do that, Chairman,
Okay.
it's only because I've been asked a question by the member of the public who is watching this meeting. I fully understand why we're going into part 2. The question I've been asked is that at some stage we have to discuss these decisions in part 1 in public. When will that be? Will that be at Cabinet when they have a budget in front of them, or will that be at full council?
Thank you. Could you come back on that? Yeah, Councillor Hollywood. Please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm right in saying that the answer is it will be at both. But I think it is important to stress the reason we do have these discussions behind closed doors is because we're talking about people. You know, we're talking about jobs, and we're talking about services. So it is really important that we have these conversations sensitively. But of course, when the budget is finalised, it will all be in public and completely transparent. Thank you.
Right, thank you as well. So, if we agree that we can move to exclusion of public and press and go into private session. Okay. Yeah. Can you confirm that the webcast is